So let's talk about the top 3 things you need to be thinking about next year as a apartment community owner. What I think the top 3 things are that you need to be thinking of. They all have to do with something that we haven't really seen for a long time. But they all have to do with opportunity. So at the end of the day, they have to do with opportunity. But at first, it might sound a little bit negative, but it's not, because by going through this process, you'll be able to build a foundation for a great year and actually a really good year going into 2023. Okay, so what are the top 3 things as an apartment property owner I think you guys need to do? The first thing you need to do is be fully aware that your expenses are going to be increasing dramatically this coming year. And what are you going to do about it? Okay, so if you haven't already, you need to be budgeting, you need to be doing pro forma on what your property or properties are going to be doing in 2022. Okay, you need to be doing that. And as you're doing it, you need to be factoring in three main expense items that are going to be increasing dramatically for all of us here, everybody that owns apartments watching and listening to this. Okay, number 1 is property taxes. Your taxes are going to increase big time. Now again, not everybody, but for the most part, because in most parts of the country, the multifamily market has just been hot. So what that means is even though you haven't sold your property or properties, your neighbor's property that sold for $120,000 a unit, your property's still assessed at $70,000 a unit. Guess what's going to happen? That's right. That assessment's going up. It's not going down. I told you guys about the conversation I had with our own city assessor here in a meeting I had with her, I don't know, about a month ago. And it was basically, she brings in a handful of declarations of value, which are really the reports of what multifamily properties are selling for, because that has to be reported to the city and the county tax assessor's office. Well, I mean, she's excited. She should be. Big sales. So what that means is, you got a small amount of big sales, but it raises the value of almost everything. So property tax is number 1. What are you going to do about that? Are you going to do anything? But you need to be thinking about it. And there's strategies that we've talked about in other places for that. So that's property taxes, number 1. Number 2 is property casualty insurance. Property casualty insurance. You're going to see large increases there. And we're seeing them already with our multifamily here, especially compared to the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, we're seeing anywhere from 12 to 18%, if we're lucky, increases in our insurance premiums. And it's not due to us changing coverage. This is for the same amount of coverage. So what are you going to do about that cost? Are you going to change your coverage? Are you going to look at other carriers? Are you going to try to bundle and package? Are you going to try to have higher deductibles? Whatever it is, you need to be thinking about that, because it's a big expense item that will be changing. And then the last thing, number 3, that I think are the top 3 things that you need to be aware of with your expenses is labor costs. I think that goes without saying. Not only are you going to be paying more to hire people, you're going to be paying even more to keep people, the people that you want. That's just the way it is. Whether it's more pay, maybe it's adding more benefits, at the end of the day, that's just going to be more cost. Okay, so just those 3 things are going to be big. Okay, so number 1, expenses. What are you going to do about rising expenses in 2022? Number 2, most important thing the multifamily owner needs to be considering is interest rates and how that's going to affect you. Rates are going up, no doubt about it. Now, some of you have a rate that's locked in for a long time, so this isn't really that big of a deal for you right now. Not really that big of news right now. But some of you have, for example, interest-only loans that are coming due soon. Some of you have fixed-rate loans that are coming due soon. Some of you are at a point where you're looking at being able to finally maybe refinance. Maybe that big prepayment penalty goes away for you soon. So if any of those things are the case, you need to be thinking about how are you going to handle that? What are you going to do? What is your plan if rates go up? if your principal interest payment increases substantially as a result. The other thing too is maybe you're at a point where you can refinance and pull a bunch of money out, buy more property, maybe make a big distribution, whatever. But when you pull more money out, that means your debt service amount's going to be higher. So what are you going to be doing about that? How are you going to be dealing with increases in your debt service payments, because interest rates are going to go up? And as I'm recording this, they, being the federal government, they're talking about maybe 2 or 3 raises. Oh no. It'll be more than that, probably. And those raises will probably be more than what they're forecasting. Because now, if you don't know, we're playing catch up in a big way. I mean, all of the, I'll just call it stimulus money that's been flushed into the economy is now finally starting to, it's found its home for the most part, and most of it will have now found its home next year. Okay, so what do you plan on doing about the increases in your insurance? And then the third thing you need to be thinking about is, what are you going to be doing and what plan do you have in place for a continued pandemic? For the pandemic continuing. What kind of processes do you have in place? What kind of, if this happens, here's what we do. If that happens, that's what we do. What kind of plans and processes are you do you have at least modeled out? Because look, this isn't over, and if we've seen anything so far, this is going to continue to go and go and go. I don't see this ending anytime soon. I mean, I'm an optimistic guy, but we're already on, what is it, variant number 2. Don't think there won't be variant number 6. Okay, so to think that this will come to an end soon, I think is mistaken. And if, heaven forbid, it gets worse, we have another huge uptick in, infections and death. Don't think that the federal government's going to step in again and require you and say to you, well, you can't evict anymore. Don't think that is out of the question anymore. And so you want to be thinking about, well, what if things get a little bit worse? What kind of plans do we have and this doesn't have to be, in big 3-ring binder, and that'd be great if that's the case, but you need to have at least some outline of what you plan on doing if things don't work out as far as this pandemic is concerned. Okay, and really everything else other than this, we talked about the 3 main things I think multifamily owners need to do in 2022. Number 1 is really be paying attention to those expenses, because that's going to reduce your net operating income, which will reduce your property's value. And many people have purchased properties at high prices, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, what are you going to do about interest rate increases this year? I think there'll be more rate increases than what they're saying. And I think there's going to be higher increases as they go than what we are hearing about. And then number 3, pandemic-wise, what kind of plans do you have in place here? Just in case this thing gets worse, we reach another peak level. Hopefully we don't, but if we do, and heaven forbid there's eviction moratoriums again, and then there's a lot more doubling down on, you can live there as long as you want. You don't have to pay anything, because, there's a lot of that sentiment that can be doubled down. What are you going to do as a multifamily owner if and when that happens? So at least have some semblance of a plan in place there. And so, of course, we could talk about those are my top 3. We could talk about, asset management stuff like, getting your rents to market level, pass through of utilities. So we could talk specific strategies, of course, on what to do and how to do it. But those, in my mind, are pretty much kind of common sense things you do as an owner anyway. But I think the 3 things that I've mentioned now are things that are easily swept aside, pushed aside in our daily cares of life, busyness, and not really dealt with until we're at, oh my God, panic level. What do we do? When I think these are things that we need to be talking about, thinking about, and discussing right now as we go into next year. So get your planners out and start working on what you plan on doing with those three things if you haven't done them, and be fully prepared, fully ready to go with these three things. And I think owners that do, and they're really on top of these three things, will find their values continue to increase. And if 2022 is a year they want to sell, even with rising interest rates, they're going to get fantastic prices and fantastic values for their, for their properties.